So today we are continuing our journey, our yogic path in the light, and we're looking at the yamas. There are 8 limbs of yoga in Patanjali Sutras, and the first are the yamas, which are the restraints of living, and then the niyamas are how we want to live. And then there's asana, pranayama, dharana, things like that, which we'll talk about another day. But the yamas are really interesting. So for example, we were talking about, earlier there we were talking about, how do you get to the place of not caring about what other people think or feel? And this is really the path of yoga. And it's not about not caring about other people, but it's about how do you actually live your authentic life? The question came, is it even human to live like that? And the yogis would say 100%, right? When you imagine yourself as this fully actualized being, and meaning that our 7th chakra, our connection to the divine, our intuition, all of this is fully integrated into our physical lives. So a fully actualized human is fully divine, fully physical, eternal and limited, immortal and mortal. All of these things are what we are, and this is what it really is to be human. The challenge is that we aren't living a human life. We're living some weird shackled life. We're living some kind of life that keeps us small, that keeps us limited, that keeps us feeling like we're unworthy or unloved or disconnected from the world. And this is the whole point of yoga, right? We might use something like an asana or a posture to help us, root ourselves into a different energy pattern. But there is so much more to yoga, and a yama is one of those things. So the yamas are all about how to avoid the distractions of life, right? They're not a restraint like this is what you can't do. That's not what this is. This is a path to enlightenment. This is a path to freedom, of moksha, right? That's what yoga is. So these restraints are there to say, if you follow these, you will stay out of the weeds of life, and you will stay on your path. You will stay on your clear path in the light, because the world is filled with distractions. It's filled with training and societal ideals that do nothing but make us small, that do nothing that make us spin. Like lately, I've had this weird obsession with, I'll go on Facebook and they started putting like TikTok reels in there. Oh, it makes me so angry because I get looking at them and I'm like, and like all of a sudden I'm in this, and I'm watching these ridiculous little reels. And I'm like, Katrina, what are you doing? Like talk about, I'm not even alive anymore. I'm just a little monkey, like in the little reel. And I'm like, what are you doing? The world is filled with these. They don't have to be on our phone. They can be the desire for a new shirt. They can be the desire to make more money. They can be the desire to whatever, that we become so focused on it, we just start spinning and spinning and spinning on it. Well, what happened to our soul's path? What happened to the reason we're here? What happened to joy? What happened to expansion? So this is the point of the yamas, is to help us notice that if we start to get off the path, then we need to pull ourselves back on and say, hold on a minute. Why am I getting pulled off the path? Because we often talk about, doing the work on a spiritual journey. And that's what the yamas give us the clues for. So for example, today we're looking at Aparigraha, and this means non-attachment. So if you find yourself going through life and you find yourself particularly attached to certain things, this is the beginning of the work. If I have a certain job and I am really attached to keeping it, why? You're an immortal, eternal being in a world that is in constant flux. Why are you so attached to that job? Are you attached to a certain relationship? Why? What if that time is complete in that relationship? Why are you grasping for it? Right? This becomes the work. This is the beginning of our own personal rabbit hole to understand what are these unconscious patterns that are running my life. If I'm attached to having a certain amount of belongings or a certain amount of wealth, or maybe I'm attached to having no wealth and I heavily judge anyone who has wealth. Why am I so attached to this? Interesting. That's what the Yamas are. They give us our first question in our journal. They give us the question we want to ask while we're meditating or walking through the woods. Why am I so attached to these things? I am an eternal being living in a world of constant change. What in the world am I holding on so tightly to that limited thing? So this is the point of Aparigraha. The other thing I want to mention about this is, so the actual sutra itself, so this all comes out of Patanjali's Sutras. And these sutras are in Sanskrit. And because in Sanskrit, every word has like 500 translations depending on the context, it can be translated so many different ways. But one translation of the specific sutra about Aparigraha means, when you are established in non-attachment, how does it go? The reason for your birth, right, and the proper perception of your birth becomes clear. It's very messy English. But basically what they're saying is, as soon as we can live in non-attachment, we start to understand why we're here. And what they're saying, and they're not saying why we're here for expansion and joy and everything else. That's the same for everybody. But a lot of the foundation of yoga is the assumption of karma. That we are coming back into another life because we have something karmic to play out. We have unfinished business. We have a pattern that we need to understand. We're not being punished, but we have an experience here. We didn't complete it all the way. We didn't come to that realization. So we need to do it again. Sometimes we do that in a lifetime within our own conscious memory, right? We're in that relationship. We repeat it here, but it's a little bit different. We repeat it again, it's a little bit different. And it's not until we actually get it right that we change the pattern and we no longer have to do that karmic journey. So to understand that a lot of this yogic path is about how do we free ourselves from this karmic pattern, right? Well, what better to be able to actually see our karmic patterns than to watch the things we're attached to? If you have great attachment to being in a relationship at all, right? For me, when I was getting married, when I fell in love with Wayne, I was so attached to being in love. And not just being in love, I needed someone to love me. I needed that. My soul, I had such poor self-esteem. I needed someone to say, I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I can't tell you the attachment I had to that. Well, that's a very interesting rabbit hole to go down on this soul's journey. Where does that come from? Why does it matter? You know? So when we have these things in our lives, like being in a relationship, being single, being rich, being successful, showing up a certain way, being thin, being strong, being beautiful, being handsome, whatever. What is it we're so attached to? Because whatever we're attached to is the key to our karmic patterns. And when we can really look at those things and say, why am I repeating that? right? And then maybe we do yoga, maybe we meditate, maybe we listen to talks, maybe we go on pilgrimages, maybe we ecstatic dance, maybe we do whatever we need to do. But the intention is to get underneath that, understand it, so we can release the attachment. And when we release the attachment, the pattern is complete. We don't have to continue it anymore, because there's no attachment to that story any longer. So this is where the yamas are so wonderful to follow. They are not something that constrains us. They're something that frees us from this unconscious program that we just seem to be caught in over and over and over again. Another big aspect of Aparigraha, it actually comes out of the Bhagavad Gita. And a huge part of the Bhagavad Gita is, it's a story of Krishna and Arjuna. And Arjuna is the warrior and Krishna is God, basically. And Krishna's trying to say to Arjuna, do not do things for the outcome. If you choose to do this thing, do it regardless of the fruits of the labor. Like, don't do it because this is what you want to have happen. Just do it out of joy. And this is a really big thing, and it's something that we can really bring into our life in a practical way. Because can you imagine that everything you do, you have no attachment to the outcome? Imagine. It's okay to have a goal. It's okay to have a vision that you're working towards. But what if the vision is just a light post? Like sometimes I experience this a lot in life, that I'll have this idea and like, oh, wow, I would love to do that. So for example, a month ago now, maybe, someone asked me if I would teach a 300-hour teacher training, because I'm currently teaching a 200-hour, and she really wanted to continue studying. And I thought, what would I do? What would I want to teach? Because, of course, if I want to teach it, it's something I'm interested in. I want to go deeper into it. I want to expand. So right now in my life, what would I love to expand into? And of course, what came to me was, wow, I'd love to go deeper into the philosophy of Tantra. And then all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, someone donates hundreds and hundreds of books to me from Insight Timer, someone from here, hundreds and hundreds of books. Now, what if I don't end up putting together a 300-hour teacher training program? What if that's never been the point? What if that was just the vision I had to have that made me go, ah? And then someone donates all these books and I go, ah. But what if I stay attached to this 300-hour training and I miss the point? What if the whole point was, in this moment right now, I have this glorious bookshelf filled with hundreds of books. And if I narrow my scope, that the only things I'm reading for are things that will go into this teacher training program, because as a teacher, it's a huge trap, right? That you end up, it's almost hard to read for joy anymore, because everything gets translated into a video, an article, a book, a course. Like you just get into this mode of teaching, right? And I've been teaching for 20 years, so I can't even learn a new dance without thinking, oh, I should teach this dance. Like it's a huge thing. But the goal is freedom. The goal is moksha. The goal is joy. The goal is the being in this present moment and experiencing it in its completeness. So what if I release the attachment, any attachment I have to why these books appeared in my life? And I dive into them with fresh eyes. I dive into them intuitively. And I allow them to take me wherever they take me. Like, imagine how different that is. It allows us to be in this moment all the time. So like, let's say even, one time I had this goal to run the Disney marathon with my cousins. And I wasn't a runner or anything like that. But I had promised that I would run this Disney marathon with my cousins because one of them had cancer and she wanted us all to do this thing. So the goal was that. And so the prayer I put out to the universe was, I need to learn how to run, because I couldn't run for 30 seconds. Like I'm not built as a runner, right? And I like to swim. I'm a swimmer, but I'm not a runner. And then all of a sudden, this man walks into my train station who was a local doctor, a very interesting doctor who was really into yoga and a very interesting man. But I didn't know him, but he'd read my book, What If You Could Skip the Cancer? And he came in and he just started chatting with me. And I was kind of like, like this, because I had promised to do this marathon. And he says, what's up? And I said, I promised to do a marathon. And I said, and I'm not a runner. And he said, I'm just diving into natural running right now. He says, I can teach you how to run. We can do it together. And I said, really? I mean, a complete stranger just walked into my train station and offered to teach me how to run. Well, next thing you know, he and I are running 3 mornings a week before he goes to the ER, and he's teaching me how to run. He's absolutely brilliant. And next thing you know, we're transitioning into barefoot running. Well, I discover that I love barefoot running with a passion that's kind of insane. Next thing you know, he and I are teaching barefoot running clinics and blah, 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 blah. And then a tornado hit the town, and then barefoot running in a town that's just had a tornado that's covered in glass and shards of stuff is really no good. And I never ended up running the marathon. But the expansion in the meantime, because once you get into barefoot running, you get into, it is a rabbit hole of expansion, of natural living and this and that and everything. It's just an amazing thing. Imagine living like that all the time, so that no matter what we do, we let go of the outcome completely. And what happens is we end up present. We end up right here all the time. And this is really, really important, because it changes our quality of life. And we forget about quality of life because our society really teaches us about outcomes, because that's how advertising works, right? And we've been watching advertising it's literally everywhere. Like, it's just constant. And if you do this and this and this, you will achieve this. And it's literally like this part of you like, oh, and if I achieve that, I'll never be alone. And people will love me and I'll be successful. Like, can you hear, right? This is the opposite of the yogic path. They're literally teaching you about the attachments, and they're using your karma to hook you in to buy their product. Sounds so evil what I'm saying. So like, but the funny thing about it is to look at that really clearly, like look at it right in the eye and understand that that's why yoga exists, right? That's why we learn the yamas. That's why we learn Aparigraha, to say, watch out, be careful, right? So then all of a sudden, like, so for example, one of the biggest things we're sold is to become fit or thin or have bigger boobs or do whatever it is we want. And if you do this thing, if you join my gym, if you do this weight loss program, if you do this thing, you will look like this. Who could ever, turn you down? You will be loved for the rest of your life. Oh, the joyful attachment. Right? So it just plays to that. They even say this. It drives me crazy because I've worked for myself for a long, long time. And every so often I'll take like a sales course, and it makes me crazy because they'll actually say, you've got to hit people's pain points. That's what will make them buy your stuff. And it hurts my soul every time I hear it. And I refuse to do it. It just makes me sick inside, right? But to understand that's what's happening. So now let's say, you're really uncomfortable in your body, and maybe you're not connected to your body. Maybe you had trauma when you were a child. Maybe you have a family that's very obsessed with, my mom, she dieted my whole life, right? My very first diet program I went on, I was 14 with my mom, and I was skinny. But I had such body dysmorphia or whatever based in media, I think, and partly my mom's struggle, that I was sure that I could get down to size 0 if I really tried, right? So of course you start to now limit yourself. You exercise even though you hate it. I've just got to go running or else I have no willpower on top of being ugly and fat. Great, This is no quality of life. Like every single breath we take matters. Every second. Like that thing in the future, that carrot that's being dangled, first of all, it's not going to be there when you get there, because then we're going to need something else, right? Because it's that perpetuating attachment. Attachment just leads to more attachment, right? But I'm alive right now while I'm running and my knees hurt and I'm eating rice cakes and disgusting things. What about the joie de vivre right now, right? So when we choose to say, lose weight or become fit or do something like that, because of this outside end point, we know that it doesn't work, right? But when we discover that we love to dance, and that when I dance, I feel like I'm in my body, and I start to love my body, and I love how my body moves, and I love how I feel, and maybe it even brings up stuff. Or maybe you find a style of yoga that you particularly like, even if it's hard, even if it's challenging. Like I teach Kundalini yoga, and we were halfway through the teacher training and people were like, I'm not even sure I like Kundalini yoga because it's hard and it brings up stuff. But then there's something that says, oh, but I feel so good. I do like it, or whatever, right? Maybe you love hiking, right? Maybe you love playing soccer. When you find that thing you love, you go do that. And then suddenly you're going to be like, okay, I've got a big soccer game. You know what? I've got to eat these things before because that's going to help fuel me for my game. And I've got to get lots of good sleep because we've got a big tournament this weekend. And suddenly we're making all of these brilliant lifestyle changes because of this thing we love to do. And our quality of life is like, yeah, I love this, right? And you're meeting other people who love soccer and you're going on cool things. That's the point. Do you care about whether you win the game or do this or whatever? No, you just play the game. Get to run. I'm not much into sports, but my son played rugby for a year in high school. Oh, I loved watching rugby. There was something about a bunch of teenagers, and I think probably I would have loved to have done it as an adult, just running for all they're worth, just full out primal power running. It was like, wow, this is an epic sport, right? That is a joyful thing to do. And so if there's some part of you that says, boy, I would love to really feel comfortable in my body. I would love to feel fit. I'd love to increase mobility in my body. What would be fun? Then find something that's fun. Like my son and I do this animal movement program called GMB. And I just love it because I get to hang out with him. It's kind of fun. It's more fun to do it together. And it's just fun. There's no torture in it. And mobility increases and good stuff happens, right? Are we aiming for something? No. We're just hanging around, walking around the apartment like crabs and bears and monkeys and stuff, right? It's just fun. It's just living. I remember, speaking of Jim, my teacher, when we went organic with our farm, Of course, I did a lot of research about the dangers of pesticides and herbicides and what we were doing to the land and all these kind of things, and I just dove into that. Like I became obsessed with that, to the point that I grew all my own food. I grew my own grain. I ground it for flour. Like I just about went. It's no wonder that because we went organic in 1997, and I got sick with the breast lumps in 1999. I mean, I had burnt myself right out in my ideals, right? Like I was such an idealist. Like I had made myself crazy. And of course we had a farm, we had eggs, we had milk, we had everything, right? And I remember one time, and I had foster kids at the time, and then my own kids were like 2 and 4. And I remember one time going to Jim's place and sitting there, and I was beyond exhausted. Like just quite sure I was stealing energy out of my bones just to get through the day, And he says, "What's going on with you? Like, what are you so tired for?" And I said, because of course too, we were out hoeing the corn by hand, right? We weren't just spraying the corn. We were literally out there we hired local kids and stuff, and we got hoes and we were hoeing acres and acres and acres, like 40 acres of corn. Like we were nuts. The fact that we pay more for organic food, it's a thing. It's a lot of work. But anyway, and I start complaining about, and these pesticides and these conventional farmers, and I'm just bitching, right? And Jim just sits there looking at me. And he's like, "Katrina, those are terrible reasons to be organic farmers." He says, "God, if I had to think like that, I wouldn't even bother being organic." And I was like, "What?" He said, "No," he says, "there's beautiful reasons to be organic. When you're an organic farmer, you get to walk through the fields and actually notice that, there's pigweed here. That must mean there's compaction. We should do a green crop to loosen the tilth of the soil. Oh, there's quackgrass there. That's interesting. It's obviously short of this mineral." He said the most beautiful thing about being an organic farmer is that you get to commune with your land. He says, that's what you want to do. He said, with the animals, because we're organic, you can't use medication or anything like that. So you actually have to connect with your animals. They have to have beautiful bedding. They have to have access to sunshine. They have to do all these wonderful things because you have to keep them in perfect health naturally. He says that is a beautiful reason to be organic, right? And then suddenly our entire quality of life changed. Our entire focus on why we were doing it changed because we were just doing it out of joy. One of the most practical things we can play with in Aparigraha, and they often talk about this, but they talk about possessions. They talk about the things we own. And Henry David Thoreau used to talk about that. He used to say that our attachments to our possessions is one of the number one things that keep us from living a free and really royal life. And that's a very interesting thing. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't have anything. I mean, I just received 300 books. I'm pretty thrilled with these books. I'm not attached to them, but I'm pretty thrilled with them. But it's an interesting thing when we're attached to our possessions. Like, what if it's a car? Oh, I love my car. It's a great car. I mean, what if another opportunity came and you had a different, I have to have my car. Why? Like, it's so limiting. Why would we choose a limitation? Why are we attached to having a certain level of income? And then we really have to look at that. What is the cost in our life for having to have a certain level of income? And I'm not talking about not having enough to feed the kids. That's not what I'm talking about. Once our needs are met, everything beyond that, that's what we have to look at. Because meeting our needs, having a roof over our head, that's not grasping. That's not attachment. That's basic needs. Beyond that, that's the question, right? There's nothing wrong with having a shirt to wear when I'm on Insight Timer. But do I need 4 of them? Right? That becomes the question. Or do I need 40 of them? The cost is really interesting. A good friend of mine, she was having real marital problems. And they had been high school sweethearts, really, really loved each other. And then right where I live, there's a nuclear power plant just north of here. And the pay's insane. You just get paid so much money. Like, it's absolutely incredible. And he was lucky enough to get in there. But the quality of the life of living there, of working there, just sucked his soul out of him. And bit by bit, the marriage started to, all of his excitement in life kind of kept disappearing. And she'd say to him, you don't have to work there. Oh, I know, but we've got kids coming and she'd be like, no, you don't have to work there. He's like, yeah, I know, but where else am I going to make this kind of money? And of course, the truth was there was nowhere probably he was going to make that kind of money. But what a cost. And did he need that much money? Could they have happily lived on half as much? But again, we have a very curious training in our society that says, oh, no, the more money you can make, the better. If you can get a better paying job, you should take it. Do I need the more money? Do I need the extra hours? We don't ask that because we have this idea of the ladder of success. We just have to keep making more, making more, making more. Right? And eventually they divorced because he was so unhappy and all the fire was gone out of their relationship. Why do we do that? Why are we so attached to this? The other thing I want to talk about, and it's interesting in this land of attachment, is to really philosophically ask ourselves, do I understand that the world is in constant change? Like, do I accept that? Because very often our grasping is we're grasping to the idea that I don't want anything to change. Okay, I like this, so I want it to stay the same. I want the relationship to stay the same. I want the job to stay the same. I want my health to stay the same. I want where I live to stay the same. I want everything to stay the same. I don't even want to change my breakfast cereal because it has to stay the same. But what if the nature of life, and I mean the nature of humans, the nature of Maya, why we're here on earth, why we even incarnated, what if the point is constant flux and constant flow? Like, how can the point of life be finding this one thing and gripping it until we die? Right? Is that really the goal of life? And it's a really important personal question to ask ourselves. Because this is the root of this grasping, right? So instead, if we release our fingers out of that and we say, what if life is about change? What if it really is about flow? It's back to the Greek philosopher, Heraclitus, who said that a man cannot step in the same river twice, for he is not the same man and it is not the same river. What if that's life? What if we're not the same person we were yesterday? What if the world is not the same world that was yesterday? Well, then how could we possibly have attachment to the reality of yesterday? Like, it doesn't make sense. You know how they talk about the root of all suffering is in the mind? We'll talk about suffering. Being attached to a reality that no longer exists within us. and in the world. Like even if you look at it astrologically, I mean, and I don't understand that very well, but you know that if suddenly Saturn's in a new place and this and the moon's at a different place and all these, the energies are so different. What if we don't flow with that? What's going to happen? As opposed to what if we do flow with it? What if we release all the shackles, we release all the ropes that are tying us to that dock, and we allow ourselves to actually flow with the ever-changing world? Right? This is a really big deal philosophically, because we've been taught that, because of course we've been taught to be afraid, and that the only thing that will save you is safety and security. So that's why we want everything to stay the same. But that's that kind of fearful animal life that we were taught we are. But what if we're divine beings? What if these chakras up here are real? What if we really are connected to infinity and wonder and abundance and the plenum and the quantum field? How exciting would it be to flow with that? Right? Imagine the freedom, the moksha of getting to just flow with everything all the time. You know, it's funny. It all comes down to this living in the moment. You know, it's the primary teaching of all spiritual teachings, to live in this moment all the time. Not 5 minutes ago, not yesterday, not 10 years ago, nothing. Just now. You know, and there's a story that many sadhus in India who become renunciates, you know, one of the things they have to do is attend their own funeral. Imagine. And then you are free to live. Then you are free to actually live in this moment right now. You know, and it's one person might say, well, that's kind of dark. But imagine being so freed from all the limited things in the world, and now you get to actually completely merge with the universe. Right? We get to merge with the eternal. We get to merge with the whole world, because we are no longer attached to the limited things. We're not attached to our karma. We're not attached to what we think we need to achieve or prove to other people or anything like that. We're like totally free. Right? How does one flow with mass shootings, war? Well, that's a big question. I'm not sure I can give that justice. It's almost an entire talk unto itself, to be honest. What about attachment to non-material things? Kindness, compassion. I guess I wouldn't consider these attachments. I imagine them to be like a virtue, you know, like a way of living. Like kindness is just a way that humans are connected to each other. So if you are unkind to me, I might be attached to you being kind to me because I want to be around you. Like let's say I'm married and the other person is not kind to me. I might say, well, I'm attached to you being kind to me, but what I'm really attached to is being married to you. And your unkindness pushes me away. And I don't like that. Kindness is simply what connects humans. You know, if someone is hurting and you have compassion for them, like to me, this is a natural human trait. But again, if someone doesn't have compassion for something I'm going through, I'm probably more attached to their attention or my connection to them than I am how they're acting, right? What about attachment to inner peace, inner love, pursuing it with focused intensity? I think that's beautiful. I think to have it as attachment is, I think, when I would call it like toxic positivity. When I'm going to feel inner peace no matter what, even though my life is crap and I'm angry at my partner and, I'm like this, like even though life is horrible, like even someone asked earlier, how do you flow with mass shootings? Well, the truth is it's horrible. It's horrible. It's terrible. And if I'm attached to inner peace, that's a problem. I need to feel what is. I need to feel my own grief. I need to feel sadness for in the collective. I need to have compassion for everybody involved, including the shooter, because he's part of the collective too. And if I don't feel that because I'm so attached to being some enlightened person filled with inner peace, that's a problem. That's toxic positivity. That's not living in reality. And that kind of thing is what keeps us in abusive relationships, at abusive jobs. Because nope, I'm just going to find the peace. Nope, I'm just going to find the peace. It's like, no, they're hitting you. Leave. We can be see, again, this is like an attachment to being perceived as being enlightened. It's like, wow, nothing seems to faze her. She's just so peaceful all the time. She can always find the good in everything. Blah, 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 blah. You know what? Sometimes you have to get really, really angry. And you have to feel really, really sad. And you have to really, really grieve. And let all of that nonsense go. And when we get really, really angry, we make different choices in life, in our own lives. Maybe we witness these mass shootings, maybe we witness war, and we look into our own life and we say, you know what? I hate what's happening in my own kids' school system. That's it. I've had it. That's it. I'm going to make a change. Does it make you angry enough to make changes in your own life? That's the question, right? We live this asleep, dumbed down, ridiculous existence. Maybe we need to wake up, Not that I have an opinion about it. It's true, but I mean being attached to it as a very strong goal. I'm trying very hard to get to inner peace, but it's a hard road. I wonder if I'm too attached and allow the path to unravel. Yeah, so I remember when I was traveling in 2018, people would often ask me, like, why are you doing this? Do you have a goal in mind? Do you have something like a North Star that you're aiming for? And I remember that my North Star was joy. I really wanted to feel like that lightness of being, just that pure joy. And it's not that I couldn't have fun or I couldn't enjoy my life. It wasn't like that. But, we did all those talks about David Hawkins' levels of consciousness and stuff. That might actually be a really interesting thing to look at. To look at all the levels below peace, to look at neutrality, acceptance, love, those kind of things. Because they really are stepping stones to achieving total peace. But it was really helpful and healthy to kind of have this joy as a North Star. And I realized how much responsibility I held in my body, right? How much I felt like I wasn't allowed to be joyful because there was suffering, things like that in the world. So if your goal is inner peace, it's really interesting to kind of look at it and say, what is standing in my way of that? Is it a philosophy? Is it a wound? Is it a what? And then I think it's very Very healthy. It's not as much an attachment as much as a soul's journey, right? That's wonderful. What's the fine line between living without attachments and being detached? So for me, thank you, that's a great question. To me, living without attachments is very personal. That I am free of my own attachments to things and to a relationship. So for example, like even, when I divorced Wayne, I wasn't detached from him, but I was no longer attached to being married to him. He and I are still good friends. He's a good man. I'm not, and even through the divorce, I was never detached from him. There's a talk on here on Insight Timer called Divorcing with Love, I think, which is the story of how he and I divorced. Because my number one thing is I didn't want him to be hurt. So I wasn't detached, but I was no longer clinging to having to be married any longer. So detachment is, if you're detached from other people, you've shut down your empathy. You've shut down compassion. That's very different. In the same way that if you do counseling work with people, Jim taught me this in spades, that you can help people, you can talk to people, you can do work with them, you can do whatever, but you can never be attached to the choices they make, whether they get better, whether they live or die. This is not your journey, and that will make you crazy. If them becoming healthy is what you're attached to, you need to be in the moment. If for some reason they've been called to you, to be with you, to work with you, then you be in that moment with them and you honor their soul's divine journey. You are not God, right? You are not their savior. You must allow them to journey. And for whatever reason they spend an hour with you, whether it's 1 hour once or 1 hour once a week, whatever you do, you can never have attachment to what they do, whether they live, nothing. You just be with them. That's it. So in that way, you're not detached at all. You are fully heart open, humanly connected, and fully releasing. Because again, why would I become someone who does healing work or whatever you want to call that? It's a question all unto itself. But why would I choose to do that if I was attached to the outcome of the people? Well, is it ego? Is it a lack of faith in people's journeys? Right? It's a very, very different thing. What about attachments to relationships? Family, should we let these go? Is there some balance? Again, when we release the attachment, like if you have attachments to your parents, sometimes we have attachments to that our parents act a certain way, that our parents appear as I want my mother to be a certain kind of mother. Why couldn't she be this kind of mother? I want my dad to be this kind of father. Right? We have attachments to something that's not real. That's the difference. What if your family's crazy? Right? Do you have an attachment to being a part of them or not? And then if you don't have an attachment to it, then you choose to come and go and you can still love them. Right? But you don't have anything extra on top, When you further define attachments, isn't grief a form of attachment? Oh, I could talk about grief for a long time. My friend, I'm just going to say shortly, my friend just sent me this interesting bit of, it was a quote from the Lakota tradition. And it talked about how when a person is grieving, they are so close, they are so wise and so deeply connected to Source, because all of the nonsense has disappeared. And you're completely connected to the whole life-death cycle. and how important the time of grieving is. I think grief is a very important thing. But if we don't allow ourselves to feel it completely, or if we have regrets, then grief can become an attachment that we never get over, right? But the pure emotion of grief is not an attachment. It's an experience. Long term, that's an attachment, loosely. When you're counseling your grandson, 100% Susie. The best thing we can ever do for children and grandchildren is to be that listening ear that they always know they can come to, that you will always honor their path, that you will always love them no matter what, and then they will make the choices their soul has to make, right? We're not living their life. We have our own life to live. The best thing you can ever do. I wonder if when non-attachment is a cover for selfishness. I know a woman who shocked her husband by saying she was going to become a celibate sannyasin. I've often thought of that. If I became a celibate sannyasin, or my partner did, then I would just assume that I would take a lover, right? Or separate or something. Like that's not the end of the discussion. Right? Just because one person chooses to be celibate, if you married them, assuming intimacy was on the table, then why not just have a lover, or maybe this is a beautiful place for polyamory, and I think there's lots of options. If you're attached to monogamy or attached to this person acting a certain way, that could be a problem for sure. Right? But non-attachment allows us to see the rainbow of possibilities. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful day.